We are here representing Ireland's Future, which is an organisation that advocates a referendum on Irish unity, but just as importantly advocates planning for that referendum. What we're doing tonight is launching this booklet which sets out Ireland's Future's proposals for planning for the next 6 or 7 years to reach a referendum. My name is Brian Feeney. I'm a historian, a commentator and a political columnist with the Irish News. On my far left is Andre Murphy, who's a journalist and commentator, and in the middle we have Professor Colin Harvey. He's professor from Queen's University, Belfast. And the first thing I'd like Colin to do is to set the context for this booklet and what the purpose of the booklet is.
Thank you very much, Brian. I'm really delighted to be here to have this discussion this evening. I suppose we could start by framing it with Ireland's Future itself. We're all on the management board of Ireland's Future and delighted to be on the management board, really. And just to start by saying, really, Ireland's Future has made the weather in relation to this discussion. The audience will be very, very familiar with the many, many highly successful events that Ireland's Future has held, whether it's the 3 Arena in Dublin, the Ulster Hall or Waterfront Hall in Belfast, or the SSE Arena. And June the 15th this summer, to which all are invited and very, very welcome indeed. We've had civic and political dialogues across the island of Ireland and internationally, and we've published a range of discussion documents, and this is the latest example of this. So my sense is that, I'm pleased to be part of that collective discussion in Ireland's Future. And one thing I'd like to hone in on this evening is we've recently had a number of meetings with political parties. People might not be aware of that. For example, before Christmas, 11 political parties in the Oireachtas talking about these proposals. The Alliance Party was there. We've had a follow-up meeting recently as well to discuss the next step, to present some of the suggestions here. So in a sense, really coalition building a consensus around a set of very, very specific proposals about the way forward. So this is the latest contribution to the public debate, and we really want to hear feedback from people watching tonight and listening. We want to hear what you have to say, and we want to encourage a broad and deep civic dialogue and conversation. Some of our members are just back, if you follow our social media, from a very successful trip to the US. So it's a really, really exciting time to be having this conversation.
Right. Andre, I wonder if you could say why you think, why now, and why 2030? What's the reason for the delay? Why should it not be sooner?
Absolutely, and Colin's so right when you talk about setting the weather for this constitutional debate. We've seen this grow really since Brexit. We have seen this interest in how could we get back into Europe, and also the wider conversation around constitutional change. And so much of that has been framed by a really bad referendum on the island of Britain in particular, where a huge change was made without any planning. So there's been this constant kind of framing of this conversation. If we're going to do a big change on this island, if we're going to change the constitution, if we're even going to have a vote on it, let's do the planning. Let's know what we're talking about. And that has been happening really in a concentrated way since 2020, since Ireland's Future came into the conversation. The time for talking about planning is over. The time for planning is here, and that's where we want to go. And so, if we look at between now and 2030, we see an electoral cycle. We see the potential for a programme for government. We see the potential for really participative planning right across the island that involves everyone. That will include the economic factors, the social factors, the cultural factors. All of that can happen in this time period, and it's really realisable. But we have to get our heads into it. We have to do the very nuts and bolts that allow that planning to happen. And that's what this document's all about.
So you're talking about planning on the island and planning economics and all the rest of it. What about is there a role for the British there? I mean, are they going to be involved in the planning, or what part do they have a part to play at all?
Of course they do. I mean, even setting the date is up to the Secretary of State, those things need to be done. The Irish government needs to be talking to the British government now. They need to be doing it at an intergovernmental level now about the conditions when the border poll will be set, agreeing the date, working out how this conversation is going to happen. That has to happen right now. This isn't something that can be delayed any longer. Ostriches have no part to play in our constitutional future. We need to be doing this.
And do you have a set of proposals that would involve both governments? What would you suggest that the British and the Irish governments do together? And what would you suggest that the Irish government has to do on its own?
Well, Brian, it's a great point. It's precisely why Ireland's Future has published this document, a set of specific recommendations that are aimed, in the first instance, really at the Irish government and civil society on this island. And I'll tell you why. People are now thinking about their manifestos. They're thinking about putting things in it, and we would like to see some of our very specific recommendations make their way into those manifestos. If you're committed to achieving constitutional change, then let's see what that preparatory work looks like. And we've made a number of suggestions here in relation to the Irish government, the next Irish government, and the negotiations around a programme for government. Political parties in terms of their manifestos now. We would like to see the language we use here and the proposals there as well. But also wider civic society and public bodies. If you're doing strategic planning over the next 6 to 7 years, we would like to see this reflected in your work. Things like a government department or a specific focus in government and the next government on doing the preparatory work, not avoiding this question. We've tried to use some new and innovative language around the all-island civic focus for this, because we think in some senses, while we see the merit of an all-island citizens' assembly in that language, we need to do something a bit innovative here. So what we've tried to do in this document is include a number of options and suggestions for the way forward. But you're right, Brian, absolutely. This is for both governments. The clear view that we have is we know enough now to start this process. There's no need to wait. There's a real imperative now to get on with the work. There's already a forum there, the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference. So one of the things we recommend in the document, that at a fairly early stage, both governments will sit down, discuss this. A joint declaration, for example, would be one way forward, so the procedural parameters are clarified and set out with a view really to giving people in 2030 on this island an informed choice. Because ultimately, Brian, what we are talking about is a pathway to choice, right? The choice that is framed by the Good Friday Agreement. We wake up every morning and hear people talk about the principle of consent. Well, that's it in this document. Give people a choice. Let people know what they're voting for. And we would like to see change. We would like to see transformative change. That's why we would like to see the work focus on a programme for a new Ireland, a really appealing proposition to people across this island to vote for something different, a better, fairer Ireland in which people will be better off, a better Ireland for everyone.
We're talking the last couple of questions ago about starting off now and trying to aim for 2030. What sort of evidence is there? What sort of evidence would lead people to think we really do have to get moving on this?
Well, I suppose there's a lot of things we can point to. We can point to the demographic changes, which are significant in the north. We can point to the electoral results that is a huge change from particularly 2016 and the assembly elections to where we are now. We can point to even opinion polls as late as last night and early this morning, where we can see that there are significant changes in how people are voting, who is voting, and their constitutional preferences. And they are influenced by a multiplicity of things. So some of the population is very, very interested in a roadmap back to the European Union. That is dictating for very many people. Other people are culturally Irish and that is a growing population. But opinion poll after opinion poll is demonstrating change, that the status quo is not as it was. And we have to engage in that. But all the time, when we talk about this, the question comes up, but what is it people might be voting for? What would a border poll actually represent? And that question must be answered. We want, and we need participation in that. We need to have those who have been excluded from public debates in the past included in this debate now, building what a new Ireland will look like that is fair, built on human rights, the principles of the Good Friday Agreement, the spine of the Good Friday Agreement, going through all of these developments and proposals that will be here. And of course that will involve what our economics will look like on the island. How do we go from the idea of all island bodies? How do we go from the idea of a shared island initiative? How do we build a new Ireland out of that? How do we ensure that those who have been traditionally disenfranchised and discriminated against have a participative and equal footing in this new Ireland? And they are strong, solid proposals that people can build themselves if we have the processes to do it. So by the time we get to 2030, people will really own this debate and own the answers to those questions.
I think it's the electoral development in the last few years has been quite important because for the first time in the council elections last year, the total nationalist vote outnumbered the total unionist vote. And one newspaper said that that was a game changer. But increasingly opinion polls are showing that the younger people are, the more likely they are to say they want reunification.
Absolutely.
And this recent poll which showed that the Alliance Party, substantial number in the Alliance Party, 38% would vote for reunification. And more than 55% think that it's inevitable.
Yeah.
And as you say, those people are voting without knowing what a united Ireland is.
Isn't that it?
So surely it has come time where people say, this is what you're going to get.
Well, I think, Brian, it really confirms the point that this document is making, really, that all the trends, the electoral trends that we've seen, the demographic trends, the opinion polls and the surveys, what's happening in terms of younger generations, really lead many of us to the conclusion that we know enough now to get on with doing the preparatory work. There's no need to, in a sense, wait around for a Secretary of State to tell us this. I think we should be doing the work now, and I think there's a particular onus on the Irish government to show leadership. That's why we are honing in very clearly on the general election in the South, people thinking about manifestos, programmes for government. We want to see people stop avoiding and evading this question. We need a focus. Now, we have concrete recommendations. There are options and suggestions. We want to encourage a debate, but we want to see the Irish government facing towards this question, because ultimately, you and I, we want this choice. We just don't want people to be talking about it, and we know enough now to start and get on with the work. You
said earlier that you'd be recommending a department to be set up. Would there be a minister? Would there be a separate set of civil servants dedicated to a referendum?
Again, great question, Brian. And one of the things that we've noticed in the discussions we've had so far is people want government to face into this, but there are different models and designs of how you do it. One way of doing it is a government department with a minister attached to that. You could have a bolstered unit within government. You know, some people think the Shared Island unit is rather facing away from this question, and the Shared Island initiative face into that. So there's all sorts of options which we've included here, models for doing it. What we have said in the document is we're not so hung up on terminology and structures. We would like government to actually get on with doing the work. It seems to me that a government department is one very good way of showing a seriousness of intent. But what really needs to happen is the work needs to get done, whatever configuration is put in place to do that. At the moment, look, we all know, we go to Shared Island discussions and it's as if, people are avoiding this. Yeah. I think we need to stop doing that. We need to wise up. We need to grow up. We need to face into this. It's a Good Friday Agreement conversation. It's in the Irish Constitution. We want to get that choice. We need to be ready when it happens.
Here's a difficult question, Andre.
Oh, no.
He's talking about a government department or a minister or whatever. What happens if there are other parties not in the government who say, we don't agree with that, we don't buy that, we think it should be a different kind of state?
I suppose the interesting thing of the discussions that Ireland's Future has been having is that all of the parties in the South are on board for this. It may take little different forms in terms of what's going to be here, but all have welcomed, in discussions last week, Ireland's Future was then meeting all the parties. None of them said these are bad ideas. None of them have said it's a bad idea to plan and we need to get more concerted. They've all said, no, these are really interesting. Let's look at this. You can absolutely bet your bottom dollar that all of the manifestos, for the first time in an election in the 26 counties in that area, are going to mention this debate. The constitutional debate will be there and how the parties engage with that. I think what's going to be really interesting is watching how civil society engages with it in exactly the same way. They will lead those parties into it, just as Ireland's Future has done a huge amount in leading this debate now. All of those organisations will into the future. We list a very small, tiny number of civil organisations in this document. There are going to be so many more who will base all of their strategic planning for the next 6 years on this debate. And we have to resource that, and those government departments need to resource that.
How do you ensure, I don't know, whichever of you wants to answer, how do you ensure that everybody owns this and that a government doesn't say, we own this proposal for Irish unity, or a political party says we own it, because that'll be rejected by the public at large?
Maybe just say something, and just to address the audience tonight who's watching this. We've talked about governments, we've talked about Ireland's Future, and we've talked about documents and all that. All the events that we've had, the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people who participated in those events. I just want to take the opportunity to thank you all for doing that, because the people of this island are part of this conversation and they will determine what happens next. We've tried to be coalition builders. We've tried to build consensus. We've tried to focus in our work on being a collective. We're all in this together, as cliched as that sounds. We've been very, very determined, but ultimately it'll be the people watching tonight, the people who you'll never see in some of these documents, who have helped us quietly to do what we've done, and to thank those people, and that's people who will make the change. But as Andrea said, we've presented our proposals in a way in which we've tried to listen.
Yeah.
We've listened to people, we've listened to parties, we've tried to create language in this document to bring people together, not to drive them apart. And ultimately, it'll be for the people of this island to decide, and we think we're trying to build a project to which the people of this island also own.
Is there a role for citizens' assembly in that process, that people can have an input into government, so it isn't two parties in a coalition? Or
the key to it will be that isn't an event, that there isn't just one citizens' assembly that meets over a weekend and everyone goes away, that this is something that is much more participative than the traditional ones to date, because it is going to be transformative. And there has to be a huge amount of outreach in that, and ensuring that communities who may be afraid of this debate, who might feel that this is a threat to them, that they are included in those assemblies. And we need to be flexible about where they meet and how we do that listening. So, whether you're in the Republic of Ireland, whether you're in Northern Ireland, whether you're in the 26 counties, whether you're in 6 counties, whatever your language, you are safe and you are in a constitutional debate that includes you, no matter what your position is within that, and you are heard and you are listened to, and that is critical within this debate. And so how we imagine citizens' assemblies needs to change to reflect the complexity we need to include in this.
And if you think about it, Brian, just to come back on, following on from Andre, that at the heart of everything we've recommended, our central recommendation has been about all-island engagement. That what we've tried to do in this document is create language around that will promote innovation around how we do that. The traditional models may not work, and we may have to think beyond the traditional models, but at the core of everything we're recommending is about participation and engagement, about bringing people on board.
You mentioned earlier the role of the British-Irish Intergovernmental Council. Would that have a say, would that be involved in agreeing a question or questions, or would it simply be the Electoral Commission in Britain, or would it be important that it wasn't a matter for the Electoral Commission, because the Good Friday Agreement says that it is the people of Ireland alone, without external impediment, would that be an external impediment if you have a British government devising questions?
Look, the starting point for some of this is the right belongs to the people of the island of Ireland alone without external impediment. And Ireland's future has always been clear from an early stage that strong British-Irish intergovernmental cooperation, framing this, was fundamentally important. Nobody on this island wants a solo run from the British government. We've had enough unilateral, shambolic behaviour. There are parameters that are there in the agreement, but this needs to be comfortably framed by British-Irish intergovernmental cooperation as well. It has to be planned. It has to be a partnership approach. Yes, there's a triggering mechanism, if you like, in relation to the Secretary of State and the British government, but the right belongs to people on this island.
How would they arrange the referendum or referendums? Because there would be two. And how do you think that could be reached and agreed?
And again, the Good Friday Agreement example is there for us. You know, what seemed very difficult at that stage was, it seems like it was so easy now when we see that there were two concurrent referenda on the state around what was huge constitutional change in the South to change the Constitution on Articles 2 and 3 and to put in place the mechanism for us making constitutional change now. So it absolutely can be done. We've done it before. And, you know, we should bear confidence in our own ability to meet the challenges we have.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important point, that there is a precedent for this.
Absolutely.
And although there were two different sets of questions, North and South, nevertheless, they operated together.
I suppose it'll play out in two jurisdictional contexts, and this is where we also need to acknowledge the enormous amount of academic and other research that has already cleared the pathway around this. You know, the work that was done by the UCL working group, the work that's been done by the hÉireann project, the Royal Irish Academy, collectives of academics who've been thinking this through, writing long and detailed papers about it, to the extent to which now, you know, I certainly feel that the procedural parameters of this are fairly clear. There's a growing consensus around the sort of procedural components of how this will work in the different jurisdictions on the island of Ireland. You know, but hopefully when the day arrives, there'll be clarity. The key thing for me, ultimately, that people know what they're voting for when the day arrives.
Obviously, nothing's going to happen before the next British and the next Irish general election, whenever they be, but be next year anyway. When they're up and running and there's a programme for government, how fast do you see that moving? What developments will there be towards our suggestions of a referendum in 2030?
Some of that will be contained in some of the manifestos that we're going to see. So we're really, you know, all of the parties for wherever they're going to be standing are already kind of sketching out what those manifestos are looking like right now. This will feature in all of those manifestos one way or another. And we will see then how quickly programmes for government can be established on this. In some ways, this is the easy part for them. There's going to be so many different challenges for everyone following the next two elections that, you know, this bit should be quite easy. And I was so struck when I was going through this document over the weekend at how quickly a programme for government, establishing the discussions, establishing the plans and moving along, how quickly this can happen. It will But look at how quickly so much other change has already happened since the Brexit vote. We know that, you know, with good speed, we can do this quickly.
Maybe just worth pointing out to the audience and really underlining the sense we want feedback is that we've actually had a go at a really, really detailed, tedious, boring timetable. So which is in the so for any incoming Irish government that would like a suggested timetable, we've gone into a lot of detail. Now, people will perhaps criticise aspects of the way we've done it, but what we've tried to do is to help the conversation by really, I think this is an unprecedented landmark document. You know, my view is clear. Ireland's future has been quietly and not so quietly making history. I think this document is part of that process, but there is a very, very detailed timeline here. I'm a big believer in timeframes, Brian. I think timeframes, things get done when there are timeframes. So have a look at the timeframe, have a look at what we suggested, agree, disagree, but we really, really want to hear from people.
Do you want to hear from unionists who say, what's in it for me?
Absolutely.
Why should I subscribe to something like this when I don't agree with what you're talking about, a reunified Ireland.
And just like the weather in any other sphere, we all have to engage with it, right? This conversation is happening, and we absolutely need and want people of a British identity and British citizens to engage with this debate as well. We can't make up what people need and how to ensure that people are participants. We need to be cognizant of it. We need that participation. So where there are gaps, if someone's looking at this going, what about me? And maybe a unionist, and maybe someone from a completely different background, insert yourself, create this conversation, and we will be absolutely willing partners in that.
Brian, look, all our work has had human rights at its centre.
That's right.
The clue's in the title. The human rights in a new Ireland that we're working for are for everyone. When we talk about the Good Friday Agreement principles, we mean that. Respect is at the heart of everything we've done. At the heart of our project is reconciliation. This is a national reconciliation project with the human rights of everyone on the island of Ireland at the centre.
Right. I think we can call it a day.
My hope.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.